welcome to Recross the Paths. My name is Cade, and my guest today is Thomas. Welcome, Thomas.
Oh, hi.
So glad you're here. Thomas and I had privilege to judge together at CubeCon 2023, and not just judge, but also share a couple of games of Cube. And I really wanted to just jump into a couple of different things together. So I'm thrilled you've taken the time to be part of this.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm here to. I love chatting about stuff. So let's chat more about things.
Well, yeah. So the stuff we're going to chat about is your stuff. You've worked
Oh
on a
no,
number
God.
of well, you've worked on a number of different projects. Let's use CubeCon as a jumping off point. You have a cube that's going to be featured at CubeCon 2024. How did we get there?
Sweet. Yeah. So yeah, I have a Lord of the Rings expanded cube. So the LOTRE cube. Which is basically an evolution of. It's a love letter to Lord of the Rings. It's a love letter to Lord of the Rings Limited, and it's a space for me to design with a little bit of with a little bit of guide rails, because I'm starting with flavor first, and then uh, a restriction where everything either has to be Lord of the Rings printed or Lord of the Rings reskinned, or would make sense being utilized in a Lord of the Rings cube. So like I put Goblin Guide in the cube because it lines up with the Goblin archetype type situation. I changed its name to Golem Guide. It probably won't pass for CubeCon, but there's small little gags you can do. But like you can't put generic super powerful stuff in there, or super. You shouldn't, because my own rules to myself was keeping it a cube that in flavor kept the flavor first. Power balance came much later. But how we got there, the road to this was sitting in day zero, day -1. I don't know what day it was. CubeCon was a blur. It was so many days of great times, and I remember sitting there in one of the game stores, Misty Mountain Games, on the Wednesday, I think. And everybody was talking about like, I brought this project, I brought this project, I brought this project, and I was on my when I was coming to CubeCon. So let's well, actually, we should step before that. Oh, hit the rewind that tape, get the record player out, spin it all the way back.
I'll get a record scratch sound to input right here.
And I get staffed to judge this event, and I only reason I get staffed to judge this event is because I live in I live in California, in Northern California, and we have a very active local cubing community. I've been cubing for years, I think since 2015, I think, because several people in my cube group out here have been cubing for as long as they can. It's one of the things that keeps me like engaged with a different kind of level of magic that I enjoy doing. Our group started growing and growing, and I think it was during 2022-ish, sometime in that era, I ended up in charge slash moderating and becoming a member of a bigger community out here of cubers, where I was helping run I was facilitating, a cubing at someone's house once a week, or cubing at a bar once a week, or a public third space once a week type of situation. We're getting everybody's cubes off the ground. We're playing a lot of cubes. A lot of people in our cube group had their cubes at the first CubeCon, the very first one. Um, that was a cube that I wasn't really aware of what was going on, or it was just outside the like, can I travel, or can I do this trip for that CubeCon? But I was like, I'll go next year. I'll go next year. I'm gonna get there and go. Judging apps came up. I took the judge application. I got there. I got there for CubeCon 2023. And as I was getting ready to go to this show, I didn't have my head like, I have to build a cube. I gotta have my own thing. I gotta have my own design thing. But I don't know, like, I'm like, I know cubes are around, and I know what people are building more or less, but like everybody's playing vintage cube, or everybody's playing legacy where it's not vintage cube, they just cut the power. Like I felt like I already had like a
Like it's
bad.
a familiar flavor, right?
Well, I had a familiar flavor. I also had like a bad preconception, like I didn't know what restriction or creativity there was yet. CubeCon changed all of this. When I got to CubeCon and saw CubeCon and saw what people were doing, like I think even though I was on staff, I was drafting on day -1, day 0, day 1, I think.
Yeah,
Uh,
multi-day event math gets really weird. It
what
was a
gets
day
real weird.
before the main event started.
Yeah, it's like the day where like it's a day where like everybody that's flying decided to show up, I guess, and we're all like, yeah, we'll be here on or like flying. And a bunch of people are driving overnight type situation or whatnot, and then we get there on Wednesday, go to the game shop. Everybody's already excited. There's already like this buzz. I don't want this to be a 45-minute conversation of just love of CubeCon, but I think there is a conversation to be had about the level of energy that was just perpetually in the room from day before the event and through the event of just people wanting to share cool stuff, share cool ideas, meet each other. Everybody's excited about what everybody else is doing. Very like I don't think anybody got mad at anybody else, or anybody got mad, or anybody got like upset at anybody else's design. Like me, like people are just like really excited to share projects. Um, so the only project I had with me, and we were chatting about this on that day, was I brought Bar Cube or a variation of Bar Cube. I brought my version of the Bar Cube.
This is just to pause here briefly. This is the tavern cube, right?
Correct.
The gimmick on this one that I really loved was that each player starts with an edge wall in, right?
And then the whole cube in itself is it's unsleeved, no tokens, no +1/+1 counters, no food, no clues, nothing like that. No ability to make 1/1s or anything like that. And anything that did make a token has been Sharpie eroded. Um, so that a lot of cards now just say learn lesson, or a lot of cards say that's what the first gimmick was. Everything said for learn lesson. A bunch of new creatures gain the word lesson, so you could learn for creatures in your sideboard. And this was made to be drafted by up to 4 people, and you would draft the whole pile. And if you draft with 2 people, you figure it out. And then there's a bunch of adventures in there, and the idea was that you would be able to use the tavern. All good stories start in a tavern, and you'll start your little narrative playing your little battle. I'm a big D&D nerd. This sounded like a great concept. I was part of the organization team, organization. I don't know. I was part of the group that helped run Bar Cube Night last year. This year, I'll be there again. I'm going to be just like I designed one of my cubes got in for that event as well. I'm helping out and doing what needs to be done, between being a judge slash being a person that knows event structure slash being a person that's there to help however you need it. This cube evolved in like real time over the course of that weekend. During the Bar Cube night, somebody pitched the idea of, hey, this card could do this in your environment instead, or I think this part should be changed a bit. Can I just edit this card that's already been sharpied with more Sharpie? And I was like, yeah, sure, go for it. And then I just like snapped off to was like anybody playing this cube, once you're done drafting, but before you play, you get to edit one card that has not been edited yet. That was just the casual pitch. I then walked away and went to go do other things because I had to like manage the room slash hang out slash do whatever. I come back to grab my cube at the end of the night, and like 7 different cards have been edited, and it just starts
Excellent.
spiraling out of control. It starts spiraling out of control. Air quotes with my hands as I'm saying, as this became the gimmick of this cube, that it was player got to everybody got to do a design step. Everybody got a chance to draft it, see what the cube looks like, and then tweak something. So everybody gets to add their piece of design to this cube. And I think that was something like really cool and like a little bit unique of an approach. Uh, and then I've decided that I'm going to turn this tavern cube. So I've kept it together. It's still going. It gets a handful of cards every new set, and I just pull things out that have not been edited, so that we're not removing things people have done. When the cube gets to 100% edited cards, I will then put all of that into a new box, and it will keep going as I iterate it until it hits a 360 stack, and it's going to be a full 8-player cubing draft that will be done for players. There'll be the tales from the cavern, and it's like your level 18 D&D characters where it's all busted cards. Everything is creative,
Oh,
requires
that's so
way too much
good.
more reading, but it'll be a great time.
Well, it becomes, yeah, a hall of fame, so then all your little storytelling things in a way or hall of infamy, right?
Yep,
But yeah, the
Hall of Infamy, a Hall of what were we doing? Where did that idea come from? Why does that burn spell have death touch? It's like we don't know. It just or it does. That's what it's got now. So I've been tweaking on that one. So that one is one of my projects that That's the so I brought that project with me to CubeCon as an experiment. That
Right.
was the goal. And
We're getting back to the thread here. Right.
getting back to the thread of so get staffed, work on a small nuanced project. Bring the small nuanced project with me to CubeCon. Get to CubeCon. Introduce my idea of my cube to people. People get real excited. And then as I spend the weekend playing so many cubes, I'm like, I really want to do another project. I want my full 360 cube. I want a full cube. I want a cube in CubeCon. That was my. I walked away from CubeCon 2023 and 2023, and I looked at my I looked at my hotel mates and my flight mates and stuff like that, and I said, I will have a cube in the main event next year. That is my goal. Lo and behold, I have a cube in the main event this year. That I got there sheer on the fear fact of I made a cube that had rich flavor that stood out in itself on its concept, and apparently people liked enough to vote up.
And that can be a tough goal to attain too. It's kind of a subjective thing. It's kind of a, if you will, a marketing thing too. But that's really satisfying to set out that goal and in a year put together something that people are excited about.
I mean, people want to play it. It's the only way we got there is that it got out there in the voting brackets. It got out there. It got in there. People voted for it, and I'm very appreciative of everybody that voted for it. I'm hoping that the cube provides the experience people want to play at the show. To me, it's a love letter to Lord of the Rings, and it's a space for me to flex my design skill set or my ability to be a designer. I think at this point, I am just a person that enjoys magic and likes to dabble a lot and tweak things and mess around with things. So this is an experiment phase for me. And if people enjoy it, that's my goal. I've tested this cube about 10 times since I've made it last year. Because Lord of the Rings came out before CubeCon, but I didn't have Lord of the Rings in mind as the cube I was really going to push until after CubeCon. And I built the cube and I've been grinding it since in play groups. And so far, feedback's good. So I'm hoping that people at this show enjoy it.
So Thomas, why Lord of the Rings?
Okay, so simply, I bought Lord of the Rings when they announced it. I was excited. I'm a big Lord of the Rings nerd. Big into Lord of the Rings. When they announced Lord of the Rings, I looked at my partner and said, "We're buying a bunch of this. We're drafting a bunch of this." And she said, "Okay, cool." And then it was like my birthday during the summer, and we were working on a whole bunch of stuff. And she got me a whole bunch of collector boxes, and we were able to utilize the collector packs plus a bunch of boxes. We run a very regular retail drafting play group, and we were drafting a lot and having a lot of content. So I had a bunch of Lord of the Rings stuff, which made it so much easier to go, cool, I'm building a cube that specifically has to use this set. So I don't have to worry about having to hunt down a bunch of cards or have to go find pieces until that's like stage 3 of this process. Stage 1 is use what we opened. Stage 2 is we're using restriction breeds creativity here. We're restricted to Lord of the Rings cards. Wonderful. Let's find the flavor. Let's find the nuance and how to design in this space. Now I think I did a pretty good job in that and overall. And then, hashtag thank you, Watsy, for making Lord of the Rings happen.
So you mentioned earlier that this is a project where you start with the flavor and then
Mhm.
some of the functionality comes a little bit afterwards. How do you strike that balance?
So we start with flavor, we work our way down, we test it. I put a bunch of ideas in there. I tried to find medium power. I think if it's good enough to be in a vintage cube, I have to question it because then I'm worried that it's too strong. If it's good enough to be in a vintage cube, but it's also showing up in like maybe popper cubes or medium cubes when I'm just like looking around at what people are playing, okay, that gives us an idea that this card is either its power could be adapted to your environment. It's not just a haymaker. Then step 3 is just testing it. I think I cut a lot of the cards that are just like free wins. A lot of things that are like I cut the monarch mechanic. Don't want that in there because it's just going to lead to people snowballing too fast. I cut mostly really powerful artifacts that were like not color type situation because I felt like that was giving that's like if you just drafted Horn of Gondor, you just won. It didn't matter what your opponent did. You just jammed Horn of Gondor, and I just felt like, okay, we're gonna cut things like that. So it just comes to play experience was the number one factor.
The quick note on Horn of Gondor is like players who enjoyed Cranko Mob Boss but don't want
Hmm.
to be restricted to red
Hmm.
just get to win with colorless.
Correct. It's like I made sure that. I tried my best to cut back on the things like the one rings in there, and like yes, the person that gets the one ring is gonna have a great time, but it's not like unbeatable. It's definitely happened where people have won the game from people have beaten players with the one ring, which is a really cool flavor. So I like that that's happened. Someone has killed somebody with the Orzhov Frodo that has like the "if I hit you, I win" clause. That has happened. So and it happened for a person to become the 3-0 player of the pod. So that's on the achievement book.
So they've like completed the journey here.
They have completed the whole journey. They did the whole tale, top to bottom. And then I cut Orcish Bowmaster. I am a legacy player through and through, and a lot of players in our friend group play a lot of formats. And I think just Orcish Bowmaster has just made us all upset. And I feel like this card's just too free. And I'm like, we're gonna cut this. This card should not have been in this. So we're gonna move that away.
Yeah, seems like more of a plant for a constructive format like Legacy
100%.
than a balanced limited card.
The number one is flavor, but number two is also creating a good limited experience. And that is we're not evaluating power. It's like, is this another busted commander card or cube card or like cube plus plus? Like, am I playing March of the Machines, or am I playing a more powered down limited format? And this should be technically on the direction of a more powered down limited format. These are my opinions and my thoughts. That's just where we went with it.
Where along the process did you determine that you wanted to add non Lord of the Rings cards to this?
When I graded the first draft of the cube and I did a card count and realized that the number of cards I wanted to put in the cube, I would have to first break Singleton. And I was like, okay, I already know I have to do that because we're already working in a small card pool. But then it felt like I didn't want the cube just to become the 56 best cards from limited times four or something like that. I didn't want it to just be that kind of environment. So I got to a point where I could etch out each of the colors, etch out what needs to be repetitive and what doesn't. Spoiler: ring tempt need to be supported, needs to be in multiples. So those were like, I broke singleton in each color for ring tempt. I broke singleton in each color for the land fixers because that's an important part of the limited format. I broke singleton for a couple archetype required cards, like there's 3 Nazguls, there's 3 of the Bath songs, there's 3 many partings to make those archetypes work. There's 3 great halls of, I don't know, the land, the great halls. I can't remember the
Great Hall of the Citadel.
Great Hall of Citadel. Yeah, the one that produces mana for your legendary, so you can make your legendary work. So I definitely had to figure out. Okay, cool. We've etched out our baseline. We've etched out our identity of what each of the colors want to be doing. We've etched out where the repetitiveness needs to be. Still not hitting 360. So how do we get there? Well, the answer we get there is we look at cards outside of Lord of the Rings that would go into these types or play along well with these types. And that's where I went with. Tree Folk was really easy. I wanted to make Tree Folk more show up. So I was like, great, Scryfall search Tree Folk. What we got? But after that one, I started filling in the gaps. I'm like, I wanted Scry cards for blue. I wanted
Like goblins, it looks
got
like.
more goblins in red. That was kind of it. And then after that one, I was like, there was a point where there was more like D&D cards that were in there because their mechanics made sense. But then someone like pointed out to me going, why are there legendary creatures on this cube that aren't Lord of the Ring legendaries? I was like, oh, that's a great
Hmm.
idea. That's not, you're not wrong. And so like we sat down, we just did like a top to down edit, and like every single legendary that's in the cube has to be a Lord of the Rings legendary. So that impacts another design window where they print so much good stuff now these days, but a lot of it has legendary on it. So it's like, oh nope, doesn't mean it's standard anymore. It can't be a legendary card because the legendary cards should all be Lord of the Rings flavored.
Right, like Tiny Bones not in Middle
No,
Earth.
unfortunately, I'm holding out for a. I would love, like, this is my wish. I'm putting the energy in the world. I want a Lord of the. I want them to go back and do it again. I assume maybe the powers that be will get a Lord of the Rings 2 set down the road, or a Lord of the Rings like a remaster or a redux set where it's a bunch of reskinning stuff. That would be a really cool, because that was their a best product they did. So I would love another pass at more cards just to give us more stuff to put in the cube that works.
So for most people that are curating cubes, I think they find that it's a continual process until they being Wizards of the Coast, print Lord of the Rings 2 Electric Boogaloo. You think it's possible
Mhm.
for this project to reach a state of completion?
I think there will be a point in which I put this cube on pause, and that will only because I am only yet one mere mortal, and I'm working on many projects over time, and I'll probably get distracted and want to put spoons into another project. Will this cube ever be in a final end state? No, and I don't. I believe that's a good thing. I believe that we shouldn't have a final end state because if we did, there wouldn't be a point in trying to experiment with it more. So that's the hashtag. He used to be a school teacher kind of mentality coming through.
Well, you did suggest that you're but a single mortal, but it's the small everyday deed of ordinary folks that keep the darkness at bay.
Eventually, this cube in itself will reach a. I feel like we can go through stages of where I'm comfortable with the experience and what it's doing, but maybe one day we get to the point where I want Monarch to happen again, or I want to tweak it to. I want to like an idea in my head is I want to cut the blue green archetype completely out and try the cube in a different direction. But like right now, it's set up to follow a draft and more of the draft environment with plus or minus. Down the road, there might be some more different thinking on how I want to approach the list of cards.
As you consider the Lord of the Rings expanded cube
Mhm.
holistically, what have you found most surprising about working on this project?
I think the most interesting working on this project is the excited reception, or if another way to put it would be just the number of people. Like people love when you're doing other stuff or when you're working on projects, and I haven't run into anybody that's overwhelmingly upset or frustrated with what this cube. And everybody I've either pitched it to or told the story of what I'm doing or showed the list or we've tested the cube in person, everybody's either just excited or at least entertained by what is happening in front of them. And that was something that I was like, I'm waiting for the feedback. I wait for someone to go like, this isn't what I expected, or I wanted to see this powerful card in here, or like why is this archetype like dominating the table? Instead, it's always like, hey, I have some like constructive criticism for you about like this tweak, but like the cube's great. I love drafting it. Or someone's like, hey, I had to read a lot. I'm like, yeah, it's like, but that's not your fault. That's just like, oh, I have to read these new cards I've never read before because I had one person that never opened any of the commander cards before. So it's like, yep, they have to look those over type of situation. So I think the generous feedback and entertain and energy from people um was unexpected only because I had this thing cooking in my head for so long. I know it's cool. I hope other people think it's cool.
And it sounds like there's a strength in building on a foundation of the draft environment set out by the Lord of the Rings set, then with a compelling hook, like take that and refine it in a way that people can latch onto.
Yep. I tell people I'm like, if this is Lord of the Rings limited, and then it's been tweaked and messed with. So if you have some of the baselines from when you did limited in that set, you should have a good on ramp to this cube. And if someone's like, "Oh, I've never drafted it," we're getting into the point where it's been a year. We need another and one more year from now. It's been 2 years, and that's the point I think where that story I won't be able to use that hook anymore. I'll be like, "This is the Lord of the Rings. This was an expansion upon a limited draft set." Um, you might have to do some reading because their mechanics are unique, but this is a really flushed out cube project that works on all the here's your archetypes, and then we'll go through it. And that's a challenge in itself that I look forward to having to explain slash beef ups and find a way to present to people as we get further away from when it was a limited set that people had access and regular were doing to when it's not anymore.
Yeah, you probably can just memorize the prologue to Lord of the Rings, right? Something about in ages long past, people used to draft this.
When we used to draft this set, there was a darkness on the land.
So beyond curation, you're also a judge. I wanted to ask about how your role as a judge impacts your relationship with Cube.
So we were talking about this for a quick second during the pre-show taping type situation, and I think where I want to go with this answer is that my relationship to cubing and being a judge relates to the relationship of doing things, doing silly, fun, but also, like, a little bit wacky stuff. Like, judging CubeCon in itself is a different kind of it's number 1, it's convention magic, which is already a different form of magic, and then on top of it, the logistics of judging CubeCon is infinitely different than I think judging anything else I've ever judged in before in my life. Just the sheer fact of checking in cubes, managing cubes, getting cubes to tables, giving things to players to draft and then recollect from players and then redoing it again. Software was created to do all this kind of stuff with us to make these events work. I think that the evolution of judge tools and technology has gone hand in hand with how getting to do fun, silly things with magic that isn't just working on the standard things that people identify judges for. Well, like we are here to help maintain the rules. We're here to make events work. We're here to provide a safe, creative, and space for people to be in and enjoy playing Magic. We also like it when we get to do silly stuff and silly things inside the space because we are creating a different way in which people can enjoy Magic.
And just for a bit of context, your judging certainly goes beyond CubeCon. You've done some pretty high level events. You judge a lot locally out as well, I imagine.
Yeah, I've done RCQs. I worked Grand Prix slash Magic Fests. I was the head judge for California Cube Champs this year in 2024. I was a floor judge in 2023. I've worked Eternal Weekends. I've worked Convention Magic. I've been around the block doing a whole bunch of different things, and
I think the tell was that you called the CubeCon a show, and that's that's the one that you don't hear.
oh no, they found me. Mhm.
What's different about a cube event to some of these larger, more competitive environments?
Every show slash event slash gathering has a structure, and I think that the structure for ones related to cube goes very off in a different direction, and it's a fun challenge, and it's also uh, a place to definitely be curious on how we do our job. There's a combination of a lot of judges are designers. A lot of judges are curious on how different we're creating so many different limited uh we're creating opportunities for so many different kind of calls because instead of it being a modern tournament or a legacy tournament or insert standard set draft environment where we know we have an idea, we have a guideline page of here's things happening in modern right now, here's things happening in legacy right now, Urza Saga, got it, Blood Moon, got it, here's what's happening in retail right now, insert comment about whatever the set mechanic is. But then when you go to a cube based event, you are now creating an environment where there's 20, 20, 30, 40 different kinds of formats happening at the same exact time. And there's no guideline beyond you figure it out together, you and the player. My favorite judge way to interact with people over the weekend when it's like, "Hey, judge, I have a call." I'm like, "Great, we're gonna learn together because I'm gonna have to like look at whatever's happening on the board state or whatever's going on with whatever interesting rule like they're trying like." Is there a tweak to the rule set here? Is there a tweak to the way the draft was built? Was there a certain number of cards that were supposed to be utilized? Like where in the lines here did did we like not deviate because that's not the right word, but more like what's altered here to keep in mind as we're doing our rulings and work. So you get to have that challenge on top of like everybody running around being really judge. I really want to show you this. I'm like, okay, cool. What happened?" It's like, well, I did this, and then I did this, and I did this, and then they died. I'm like, oh, well, good job, well done. Everybody had a great time. Great, wonderful. All right, moving on. Next table. So I feel like there's a lot of the combination of structure and environment that allows a challenge, but it's not a challenge that it's a challenge in itself that is fun.
So as you think through some of what we've chatted about with Lord of the Rings Expanded, with the Tavern Cube, with looking broadly at your time at CubeCon and other Cube events, what advice would you offer to other designers as they are considering their own projects?
Just try it. Don't. I think the number one thing people are going to do is like so and so already has this cube, or someone in my play group already has a cube, or I heard about this on the internet already. Someone else is playing this cube already. Who cares? Just put, if you don't want to make your own, go ahead and borrow someone else's project idea. Give them credit. Like make sure you say, "Hey, I borrowed this from so and so." But at the same time, test it out. Give it a shot. Tweak a couple cards that call out to you. I think the number one thing to do if you want to start doing this in the space, you want to be in that space, is just start doing it because you don't know where you're going to go, and none of us know where we're going to go. But we get there by doing the thing. Uh, so that is my number one piece of thing. Go ahead and try it out, give it a whirl, and then you'll see what you like. You'll find out real quickly. Oh, I hated how these mechanics work, or I hated that this. I kept myself to these rules, or I kept myself to this card pool or this set. It's like, okay, cool. You learned something you didn't want to do, but then now you know what to try next.
Well, Thomas, one of my favorite questions to ask by way of wrap up is if you could have any card printed as a promo, what card would it be and who would you have do the illustration?
I want an in-universe Gishath for my commander deck because I'm a dinosaur guy, and I want the movie T Rex when it's like right after it eats the goat, like it's coming through the fence. That's what I want. Like it's like they're like when they're all screaming and it's coming through the it's pushing a car around and stuff. Like that's the T Rex shot I want.
Rain
Rain
splattering,
splattering
blood
everything.
splashing
It's got
everywhere.
that. It's got the rain, the fences, the electricity is popping off the fence. Actually, it would have in the bottom corner would be Ian with Ian Malcolm with the flare running. That would be.
There we go. We'll talk to the licensing team and see what we can put together.
Please do it again, please.
Well, Thomas, we've covered a lot of ground here, and I really appreciate you unpacking so much of your journey here. I mean, looking at the bar cube, looking at a project that has developed over the year. This has really been great, and I appreciate you taking the time to be part of it.
Thank you for bringing me on. I love talking stuff, and I hope that this was a fun time.
If folks want to learn more about the Lord of the Rings Expanded Cube, or perhaps any of the other environments you're working on, where would be the best place for me to point them?
Or they should go to the comments. They should go below to the links. But my cube is the LOTRE Lord of the Rings Expanded Cube. It's on cubecobra.com/LOTRE, all capitals, assuming that works, I hope. And you can find me at Mages and Mentors on everything.
Sweet, and I'll absolutely link those for folks. But again, I appreciate you as I'm looking forward to getting to be on staff together this
Yeah.
year at CubeCon and hopefully get to share some cube along the way wherever opportunity arises.
I have a fun little secret project coming. It's called War of the Space, and I'm looking forward to showing you some alpha runs of the cube at CubeCon.
Excellent insider info. Well, Thomas, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kate. Appreciate it.